Hello, everybody. I am Tammy Jo Wilson. This is my show, Figuring It Out, which I just like to play on words. All figurative work. And this past year has definitely been about me just figuring it out and how to continue my art practice. I am primarily a painter. That's how I started out. Also do photography and curatorial work. Maybe I'll just begin by request of a little bit of a timeline of the work in this show. So actually maybe I'll begin by closing the door. There we go. So I'd like to begin with a little bit of a timeline about the work. I believe, trying to remember the order now in my mind. I know, so the piece over here with the blue and then the red underneath, I think is the oldest piece in the show. And I created that in the very first month of the pandemic, when everybody was on lockdown. We were all stuck in our houses and really afraid and scared and didn't really know what to expect. And I felt this really intense pressure and opportunity of, I'm not working. I don't have to go to my job. Nothing's happening. I have nothing going on. So I need to really be in my studio and make work because I might never have another opportunity in my life to have this much time where I can't do anything. I have to stay inside. And so that piece is very much about the turmoil of that moment, but also the pressure of that. And at the point, figurative work was still relatively new to me. And I came to it because my work previously was very abstract. I was doing a lot of encaustic work, oil painting, these really what I called natural or organic abstractions based on natural objects, but referencing the human body, but then also the natural world. But I was finding people were having a hard time connecting with the work because it was so abstract and it wasn't communicating or connecting or landing in the way I wanted it to. And I witnessed and was a part of a collaborative project where there was an artist doing a spoken word piece about a story from her life, a really traumatic event. And then there was a dancer in the same space in front of her doing a performative dance about what she was talking about. And then I was on another corner. We had a little square, and she was reading her story, the dance, and then I was sitting on a stool in the moment creating pieces, paintings with watercolor in response to hearing her story and seeing the dance happen. And so I would do a piece, hang it on the wall, listen, she would do it again, I would do another piece. And so having that opportunity to make work so quickly, and that really got me into watercolor because I had to make work instantly, in the moment. No time for oil paint, just be in there. And then the beauty of the dancer and how she was expressing with her body and those movements. And so it really landed with me, the need for the figure in my work. And so I started drawing these figures like this in my car in a little sketchbook and started to figure out, well, what do they look like? How do their arms work? Creating a visual language for myself with the figures. And then trying to figure out, well, how does that fit with these organic abstractions that I've been doing? And so back in 2020, when the pandemic hit and I made that first one, that's an oil painting with also pastel drawing, so like a drawing marks on it that is a little bit unique. That was really a point when I started getting solidified with the figurative work. And I believe the next one was this large piece. And that's kind of dipping into something I don't think about not that I don't think about it, but I haven't approached in my work as much as far as the environment and our relationship with the earth. In my past organic abstractions, it was more about the body connecting with the work and the similarities between our human body and nature, and thinking about the way our veins are, the way our hair are, the way our skin is, and then seeing those things mirrored in the natural world, whether it's in trees, in roots, in soil, in whatever. But this one was really more about the relationship with the earth and the harm and the inevitableness of how we need to evolve, or cease to exist. So the title for this one's called Immortality or Death. We need to figure out how to be here indefinitely in a safe way, or we will not be here anymore. And the plants are a take on the amaranth grain, but my own version of it. I don't think the leaves actually look on that, but it was inspired by that. That one's oil paint and cold wax in its material and process. So just starting to go bigger with the work. That was the first larger figure that I made. And then as I was evolving with the work, encaustic was one of the processes that I used a lot previously through an artist residency. For those that don't know, encaustic is a combination of melted beeswax, tree resin, and then powdered pigments mixed together, and you paint with it while it's in a melted state, which is a very unique process and has a thickness to it, a transparency to it. And this piece over here is in that with that material, so it goes back to that organic abstraction. But then with this residency that I did, this is actually a relatively new piece, trying to figure out how to bring the figure back into that natural material in my process. And I really love experimentation, but I'm trying to use the figure as the thing that holds the consistency through my work, even though I work with all these different types of painting. So that one was next on the timeline. Actually, that one was next, and then this one was actually next. I made it about a year ago now, a little over a year ago, in Sisters, Oregon, sitting in the woods, with the stream and the trees and the cows around me, trying to heal in my life and find new direction. And that residency was very much about growth in the natural world. It was meant to be like an agricultural thing, so I was really thinking about that, about coming from the earth. And so that's kind of part of the similarities of these two, but from different directions. And then the square one over there, which I call Oceans Apart, again, a continuation of my thought process and my own growth in figuring it out. I kind of see that one as the person floating on the surface of the water, but there's also like flame and fire in it at the same time for me, with the yellow and the red, of almost like when you have a soup, and the things float to the surface. And when I have the different limbs or body parts disconnected, it's not like a tearing apart. It's not a violent disconnection of the body. It's more just like a floating separation. It's more of a dance, of a movement, but also kind of a coming together. It's just a looseness and a flow in that way. And so that one to me is very, very floating, but fire a little bit at the same time, of that fire-water combination. Made that one in the last years as well. And then these 5 watercolor over here, my most recent, and except for this one, because it's literally on the wall. Most recent ones, going back to the watercolor process, from when I first started doing being inspired to move my work into the figurative realm, and going back to that figurative language that I was learning and building within my work. And what I found I really enjoy with the watercolor process is it works with me, and it guides me, and it talks to me, and I respond to it. I make a mark, I move the paint around. It kind of does things outside of my control, and I can either like it, don't like it, but I work with it. I see something in it, and then I'm like, okay, this is where it wanted to go. I'm going to move forward. This is what I see. And so we work together in a way that oil paint doesn't do. It only does exactly what you make it do, and nothing more and nothing less. Watercolor feels very much like a partner with me in the process, which I really, really enjoy. And there's a shortness of time in creating the work, where I made all of these at the same time. So I would do one layer of paint, and it would be wet, and you have to set it aside and let it dry, and then I'd go to the next one. I'd do another layer, and I'd have them all spread out all around my house. And then I'd get to the end of the last one, and the first one would be dry, and then I would go back and I would do another section on that one, and then I would go through each one of them again. And then I'd set them aside for a day and set one out maybe or two out in my apartment and look at it over the course of the week. And then I would come back and open them all up again. And then go back and go through, have my music playing and go through again, one at a time, adding a little bit more and seeing what the paint would reveal. Like this one that I call the Night, with the larger piece, I don't know how to describe it, but with the 4 breaths on it, I don't know. And it's the first, I think, and only piece that I've done that has an eye. That I really, really, it's subtle, he's there, or she's there, it's there in the figure, it can be whatever combination of, but I find that really engaging, it just kind of revealed itself in the white space that happened there, and even that little bit of paint that kind of streaked up the top, there was an energy to it that revealed itself to me. That this medium, this process. I also use ink to get some of the really good blacks, and I'll go back with a really tiny pen and draw in some of the details as well at the very end. But working with these, I'm still figuring out why I do endless amounts of breaths in my work, but there they are. There they are. It's what I see, it's what I'm drawn to make, as well as that kind of hip, almost musical violin shape of the body as well. So continuing with this work, I'm really looking forward to going bigger with the watercolors, bigger with this piece over here. Is going all the way back to those moments when I was sitting in my car because I didn't have it was the only time I could make. I'm going to get to this thing that I'm going to 15 minutes early. I'm going to sit in my car and bring out a sketchbook and draw in black ink on white paper because this is what I have. This is what I can do to make my work. And to me, this just feels like the next level up of that original point of when I was learning these, and this to me feels like a first step of going from like this to this to this to wanting to go even bigger with this, to maybe add more color, to just keep expanding and growing and making the smaller pieces as well, but just seeing how far I can take it and how big I can go with it. And there's a lot of need for public artists like myself, and so I look forward to seeing where I can go with these figures. Because I think they speak to and say what I'm saying in a way that has been really successful in my work. Maybe not articulate in like a way that I can put into words, but in the way that dance and movement expresses things. I feel like they're speaking in that way. And so I'm looking forward to see if I can make one that's maybe 3 times that size next. I don't know. I'll have to find a spot for it. But if anybody, let me know. Let me know. Yeah. Inside, outside, I'll figure it out. But I started it. Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would like to add on that one. I don't think so. But I would love to have some questions. Yes.
That's more like a comment. I guess it can turn into a question. But what's interesting to me when you were describing your timeline, and that the watercolors came after the oil paintings, because it almost seems like the watercolors are like studies for the oil paintings, and then also, so that was just kind of like interesting to me. And then also how your process is so different when you said you're like working with the watercolors, it's kind of more like intuitive, and you're just kind of working together, and then like the oil painting is more like planned, you know? And I'm just wondering, but the results are still like very similar. I don't know how I can turn that into a question.
No, I know what you mean, and I feel like, yeah, in some ways, yeah, the watercolor is, I don't want to say a study, but it is like a practice back and forth in the way that I work of, I need to do these quicker ones and like really get it out and be expressive and not be uptight with it. But then I also will draw these figures. Like I drew this on paper first, drew a small version, kind of knew the size of the space and made it the right shape. And then got actually 2 projectors projected it up on the wall. So it's a really different, like total opposite of a watercolor process. And same with the oil paintings. I usually draw the figure first. Even if I don't know what the rest of the painting looks like, I will draw the figure first and then figure out the painting around it. But I feel like I need to do the watercolors to be able to, when I get to the time and investment commitment it takes to do the oil painting, like, yeah. But I still have to make work in between the year it takes to finish an oil painting. Like I can't, I need to like move forward. And then encaustic, that's a whole different timeline, which is maybe part of why I like working in so many different mediums, because they do all have, like an oil painting could take a year, watercolors, it could be a day, but it's usually several sittings, several times working with it. But the encaustic can be even fewer. Generally not a day, but it's just a whole different feeling of like melting and carving and building layers on top of each other. And the encaustic works with me in a similar way to the watercolor. Not quite the same, because I can manipulate it and like pull it back. So it's almost in between oil painting and watercolor in some ways. What other mediums do I use?
Because all of this for me, just in doing work,
Yeah.
is the relationships with each particular thing. Because, right, they all should have different requirements and constraints. So, yeah, what other?
So historically, when I got my degrees in art, I studied photography for both of my degrees. And when I do photography, I don't capture a moment in time. I do it from a painter's perspective, where I build a little scene. I generally bring in figures. The figures are doing something. I create an environment, and then I photograph and I capture that. And so I've done it that way. And there was some interesting figurative work that I made a really long time ago that I saw it, opened it up, and saw the connection to this work in a really, really interesting way of like, oh, sometimes the artist's voice, it comes out. My work, it just is my work. There's no way around it. I couldn't not make the work the way I do, even sometimes in the past when I wasn't aware of it. So I've done photography. I've even done some like textile work and some other more unusual stuff. The textile stuff has generally been really different, and I don't know if I'll go back there too much. I kind of don't really like to sew. I love fabric. But something. But putting in that time with the machine, that's me pushing it through the machine. Not my favorite. But I'll probably go back to photography. I really like working with text and words and language, and I'm hoping to find a really good way to combine the figurative work with actual like words and languages and phrases or some sort of poetic something. So I feel like that's somewhere I want to go next for sure.
Part 2. So,
Yeah.
because I have this going on with my brother. He makes movies. But we only met like less than 20 years ago. And we were sitting talking one time, and he was explaining something to me, and I was like, oh my God, his processing is exactly like mine, which was freaky. We did not grow up together. So, do you find your processing from basically the same, even though you're using totally different materials?
I would say yes. And I think too, I really try to be aware of whatever I'm processing, how it needs to come out. And sometimes it needs a long, slow conversation of it's so deep down, it needs to be an oil painting that takes time. And sometimes I don't even know that. And because I'm investing the time, like a whole year in a particular piece and looking at it on my easel, it has the full breadth of everything that I've been through and everything that I thought about in that year in the piece. yeah, but it's, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like the subject matter of the work and maybe like how that ties into the process?
Sure. So when I'm first drawing one of these figures, whether it's the watercolor or like planning for this, I kind of get quiet in myself and really connect with where I'm at emotionally in that moment in my life, like what I'm kind of just really is not even with words, just what am I feeling right now? And then I try to translate that into a gesture and into like a full body gesture. But usually I start with almost like that first like line or curve or whatever that physical body movement is. And so then I start from there, and then the rest just kind of comes together. Yeah, it kind of reveals itself in that initial moment of like, all right, I'm going to go in here, pull it out. And then during the course of the work, so if it's a longer piece, I'll start at that first point, but then it is speaking to, again, whatever the following day and the next day and the next day. And it like the color palette with that one, I tend to lean towards those warm brown reds and that kind of teal blue. Yeah, and so that's just like, that's the colors that are in here. So there's that consistency, but that's the starting point. And then the point that I look back to, but that point will change every day, but it still starts in here in like a wordless kind of space. Yes?
So I'm really excited for you with taking this and having it on a larger scale. I'm so excited because I see it and I move with it. And I'm wondering two things. Do you have any background in dance or movement? And then the other is, do you feel like you are led by your education in art at this point as you create?
I do dance. I've been dancing for over 6 years. I try to go every week. I have a regular group of folks that I dance with. And so I started that, I guess, kind of right around the time I had that revelation in my work about body movement, and I was talking about seeing that dancer there in front of me while inspiring my work, and really realizing how necessary and how good that felt creatively. So yeah, although I do dance, but there's also a little bit of a separation of like my dancing. I haven't done performance dance, so I don't anticipate being a dancer in that performative way. I feel like I really do that through my painting. What was the other part of your question?
Like when you're creating.
The education part. I definitely don't think I feel led by my education. I wouldn't even say supported. It's, sorry, schools. It was a thing that I did that I don't regret it. I think my education was important and it got me to where I am. I went to PNCA here in Portland, and then I went to San Jose State for my graduate school down in California. Two very different schools. One's a private, small art school. Everybody there was an artist. San Jose State was a state school, small program, very different vibe. But it's a lot of recognizing other people's agendas and other people's view of what the art world was at the time I was in school. A lot of how the baby boomers were taught and raised of what the art world was and what success looked like. A lot of people that weren't including people that look like me in my art education. So having a really intense awareness about that at this point in my life, of everything that was missing in my education, as well as being grateful for what I did receive, as far as being able to just stand here, not practice anything, do an artist talk, know how to talk about my work. So I have those benefits and knowing how to enter the art world. But you have to go, for me, I have to take it all with a grain of salt and recognize it for what it was and what it wasn't and what it lacked. and then try to make up for that now and educate myself in those places that got left out of my education.
Can you talk more about what it wasn't? Because in communicating with different people in different areas, like at the museum, I was talking to an installer at one point, and I was asking her to come teach some youth, and she said, well, you really should go over here because we aren't taught that in our education when we go through that process. So, could you speak some more to what you like? I like the what it was and what it wasn't. Can you talk about the what it wasn't?
Yeah. And the tough part about what it wasn't, and I still see it happening now as somebody who works in academia and the art world, what it wasn't was all of the practical, real world things of knowing how to hang my art, knowing how to install, knowing how to apply for a show, knowing how to just be out there and network and support and promote myself. And it was very much about, well, you're an artist and conceptual and material and etherealness of like being an artist without the concrete reality of what that actually means in the real world, but then also zero conversations about what it means for me as a Black woman to be out in the real art world and the art ecology and just the world in general. Like zero conversations about that. Not enough conversations about my and everyone's responsibility to the world with the work that we make and what we're putting out there. So it was a lot that was lacking. And at the time, when you're young or just naive or just don't know, because you're there to be educated, you don't know what they're leaving out. You don't find out until later when you learn it through the process of doing it. And then you're all mad because like, why did you not tell me? And so I try to like be there for those people that are learning now, but I still see all the same holes that I saw in my education. I don't know.
How would you fix that? Let's go.
Yeah. I think the art world has this view of itself. It's being all too stuck up with itself. Like being an artist is a career. They need to prepare us for being an artist as a career and talk about what the different job opportunities are and what they aren't. The reality of how we make money, how we participate, what creative careers actually look like, what kind of jobs are actually out there, what kind of jobs we can build and create for ourselves if we don't see them. I became a curator not because I went to school and wanted to be a curator. I became a curator because the world needed me to be a curator. And then I saw the benefit of that for the greater art world of like, this stuff needs to happen. Nobody else is doing it, so I'm going to do it. But then also recognizing how that can support me as an artist financially and all of that. And so accepting that it is not just this like artsy conceptual thing, that it is a career path. You have to have drive, you have to have intention. And you have to know the technical stuff. You have to know how to install art. You have to know how to do invoices and do contracts and do taxes. But they're not teaching them that. And I think, not to say too many things about the faculty out there, but a lot of them don't know. And so they don't teach it because they don't know it. Because they're not doing it. They go to work, they teach, they come home, but they're not participating fully in the art ecology. Yeah.
I want to backtrack this
Yes.
conversation, but I wanted to, I guess, observe and ask about, like, going back to the material and the process of it. I feel like I heard you saying that you're having conversations with yourself and the world through making your work, and the materials, like the material properties of the medium that you're working with, and the time, like your work is time-based, that you're open to and you're actively like seeking the materials as like collaborators in that conversation, so that you're learning from them. And yes, I'm interested in anything you wanted to say about that, but also specifically with this new mural piece,
especially since you're like, I loved it, now I want to do it 3 times bigger. What did you learn from it? Because obviously it was exciting and productive. You're wanting to do even more.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about that I haven't said yet. I almost lost it in my mind. I've learned over the years that, and I see students getting taught the opposite, and it makes me sad. And I always try and be like, is that true? The thing that was taught to you? That for me, the more personal the work is, the more relatable it is.
Yes.
And when young artists are taught to like, no, separation, don't, no. You're disconnecting yourself from your audience, you're disconnecting yourself from your work. So for me, the more I can go in here and make it personal, the more I know it's going to connect to everybody out there. And so for these pieces, this mural piece in specific, that thing that I'm reaching in here to try and express in that language and that body language, I feel it just says it louder. And that is exciting to me and bigger, and to be able to have it, that physical expression be just so, it becomes, instead of just like an individual dance, it becomes like a whole stage. In the way that, like when you dance really contained, it's just this little thing. But when you dance and you move, and it just takes up the whole space. I feel like going bigger, I'm hoping we'll do that. Give a larger kind of emotional movement to the piece.
It's bigger, it's also not framed, right? It's not
It is. She's in the room.
Yeah.
She's in the room. Yeah.
Now, can you talk to, like, your curatorial practice has been evolving over the last few years too, and like how does that, what's the back and forth between like your curatorial practice and your making practice?
Yeah, so for my curatorial practice, my main project that I do that I'm most known for is Black Matter, which I was actually invited to start that before the pandemic, and then it just became so necessary as the years went on, and that is an exhibition of all Oregon-based Black artists in various shapes and forms. And when I first was invited to curate, I had curated a little bit before that, but not with the same depth of intentionality that I had with Black Matter. I really looked for what was missing from my perspective as an artist that doesn't make work that is easily used to satisfy the agenda of the various organizations and entities and schools and galleries to talk about race, to talk about politics, because so often we're just used for that, to check the boxes and to show our faces and to have work that clearly is made by a Black artist. When you look at it, whether it's portraiture or whatever, it's got Black bodies in it, they're like, they want the world to know and they want to say this specific thing and they need to check that. But my work doesn't really do that easily. So I wasn't getting shows. And so I was like, well, how can I provide an opportunity for artists to make their work and express whatever they need to say without that agenda, without that requirement? Because white people, they're not making work about whiteness and not expected to in any way. So let's create an opportunity for us to be able to do that. It's what I needed, and it's what so many other people needed as well. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. And I'm continuing it and thinking about it in all of my curatorial work going forward, even with, I have a land art curatorial project coming up that I'm hoping goes on for multiple years. That I can carry forward with Black Matter to kind of balance that kind of justice work, but also with environmental and the land, but then also bring the Black community to that side too. So I'm hoping to have a balance between those projects.
How emotionally pigeonholed do you feel like that constraint in these times? Well, I
I feel like I'm not in the pigeonhole. I feel like they're in the pigeonhole, and they're trying to either leave me out of it because I'm not in their little thing, or they just go past me. But yeah.
And you're okay with that?
I mean, I don't know if I'm okay with it, but it is, and I'm gonna work towards expanding spaces and opportunities for Black artists to like not have to be in that hole or used in that way. Yeah. Yes.
First of all, I think that you are absolutely that leader that our arts ecology is like benefiting from. So thank you. Like for me, it doesn't ever feel like it's enough, right? But you're doing more than you're supposed to. So thank you. I really appreciate you. I really admire you. So my question is, you were just talking about making the work personal, and this work feels extremely open about the experience of embodiment, and I feel like experiencing this work for me is like, wow, this is very generous that you're sharing this much of yourself with you. Can you address the experience of having fear or maybe like reluctance to share this generously of your personal life in a show like this?
I feel like at this point in my art practice, I don't really have that fear anymore, but I have gone through it, and I've had people in my life when I was sharing what I was going through tell me that I shouldn't, and try and get me to not make the work, partly because they were worried about how it affected them, but I definitely have had moments of thinking about, if I make this work, what is my family going to think about it? What is my partner going to think about it? Not so much the greater world, but how exposing my like deep emotional stuff is going to come through. But I think over the years I've been able to get comfortable with that, especially realizing in the times when I do that, how much more successful the work is. And so having experienced that successfulness in the work of whatever hard thing I'm unpacking, and then somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, okay, I've had that happen enough times that I feel okay about it. But you really have to have that experience and be open to it to be able to do that.
Yeah. And what would your advice for younger artists be, for emerging artists be about encountering that experience that you're talking about?
Yeah. Thinking about the alternative of not being honest with yourself and not including your whole self in your work, and how miserable and unfulfilled the work will be, and how unauthentic the work will come out, and people will see that, and you will look at the work and you will see that, and it won't feel good and it won't feel whole, and until you are able to be fully yourself in your work, it'll always be a little bit off. And so you have to let go and just be your whole self in your work. But it is hard. But when you do that, I have never had an experience where somebody was like, oh, you told me too much, or like, never has anybody ever been like, I mean, other than the person that was making it about them, but I think we can all agree, not cool. Yeah.
So, at what age would you remember, did you decide that this amount of vulnerability is going to be my thing?
I was at grad school when I was struggling with the person that we were having conversations about the trauma that I was expressing in my work from violence and a lot of anger at men. And so I was making a work that was really aggressive and angry and talking about that in a really upfront way. Like with words, text carved on the wall, just very upfront, like not, yeah. but they weren't, as the person I was partnered with at the time, they weren't comfortable with that. And so I had to navigate for myself. Am I going to change my work for somebody else? Am I going to like lessen my work because the world somehow, or I feel the world can't handle what I need to say? And so while I was in graduate school, I had to ask myself that, and then I was able to have conversations about that and decide, no, this is hard, but this is what I'm going to make. And yeah, and I had enough people come to me personally and say thank you, that I knew it was the right thing. And yeah.
Who inspired you from your adolescence on?
I would go to, so I started painting really, really young. Seriously, well, not really, I guess it depends what you mean really young is, but I started studying under a painter, I think I was 15 or 16. I would take my painting and go to his studio and put my painting next to his painting, and we would paint together. And stylistically, he was a magical realist is what he called himself. So not surrealism in that genre, there was a lot more kind of magic in the way we think of magic, but in a realistic form in his work. My work was very dark and not that, but just sitting next to him and feeling supported and feeling almost, I don't want to say like his equal, but that I could be, at some point when I was older, not made to feel like a child or incapable of like, we're just going to hang out and paint together and you're going to be a painter as you get older. And that was really amazing.
How did your family feel about it?
Oh, they were super supportive, actually. I'm really, really fortunate. My dad would take me and he would drive me there and drop me off because I wasn't driving yet. But I was really fortunate to have a family that was supportive of the arts, and I think it's why I've been able to thrive in it so well and be able to go to art school and just always know what I wanted to do. All great questions. Thank you. Is that it? Anything else? Breathe? I'm good, yeah. And thank you, Doug. We'll have to give a little promo for Souvenir Gallery and allowing us to be here in this space in a unique way where it's not about commodifying the work, it's just about us being able to express ourselves, and we appreciate that.
Well, I thank you. We couldn't be doing this space without your help, and I try to tell everybody that you were so helpful, not just curating the 3 shows, but just being such a great sounding board for like how to kind of structure the space. That was really helpful, and so I'm like always indebted to that. But also, just like earlier, you said a thing that really resonated with me that I just really appreciate, and it's just the idea of artists working in ways to create opportunities for each other and for other artists, and like what you've been doing like with your curatorial practice and everything, just like how much I really appreciate that and value that, and I think it's a great model for everyone else to like that's kind of how a working artist should be. That's like another thing they don't talk about in school.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, it's like we've kind of talked about it before, just sort of like upbringing in like a DIY punk world where that is the education. It's like if you're gonna book shows for your band, you also book shows with other bands, and like that sort of being just like absent in the art circles that I exist in. Yeah. And so like that's kind of like part of this space, and like what I see you do is Bonnie do like the thing where it's just like, yeah, like we should be doing this for each other, creating opportunities for each other, because like otherwise it's just like a giant world of gatekeeping. Yeah. It's really hard to navigate. Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question.
All right.
How do you feel about commodification?
That is a big question. So artists should always get paid for their work, for their time, for their experience, for their knowledge, for their contributions. I think as artists we need to be careful with how we commodify ourselves and how we put ourselves out there. And also careful of how we allow the world to commodify our work. I think collectively we're doing a better job of that, but as I meet artists that really devalue their work, having those conversations with them, because they're holding us all back when they don't value themselves, when they don't value the education and the experience and the knowledge that they have in their work. But I mean, we are creating, I mean, not all artists, but I'm creating a painting that is an object that someone can purchase and take home and live with. I think of them a little bit like my children. A little bit. But I'm okay with that. As long as we respect the full process and experience and education of the artist. And I'm a little weary too of when artists make really cheap reproductions of their work. Let me just say, do that less. Maybe not, I'm not saying don't do it at all, because everybody's got to make money, but there's a point when we do that it demeans all of the work. And I really hope artists spend more time purchasing art and collecting art and participating in our own ecology. Yeah, every artist should be an art collector to some degree, to the best degree that we can. Oh, I see something cooking in there. Or are you gonna sneeze?
It's always been a two-edged sword about what your work is and then how you want to disseminate it in the world. Because like Mofi, no reproductions whatsoever. That was her mom, for the most part. But then growing up, like when I was in my younger years, don't ask. I saw Laurel Birch as someone I wanted to be. Charles Dickens, same way. Because their stuff was everywhere, on everything. And so it meant that what you spoke in your creativity had the opportunity to be in everyone's purview, no matter their economic or anything like that. So I mean, that's always going to be an issue for me, because if I could leave everybody here with a postcard, I would.
Yeah, and that's a real thing, and that's why I can't say never do reproductions or never do like merch in that way. But what I see that I don't like is when young emerging artists start from there and aren't selling their originals because they're selling these cheap poster digital printed reproductions. And then they don't raise their prices as they work gets out there and get more seen. They just stay at this bottom level and then they think, well, everybody's buying these, so that's just what I'm going to do. Well, at some point you gotta promote yourself. At some point you gotta promote. Like when I say promote, I mean like level up yourself. Level up yourself. And also I find, like you were saying on the other end, an artist is doing really, really successful. Like Jeremy O'Kai Davis is doing really successful. But in this last year or so, like there's now t-shirts with his artwork on it. But I support that, and I'm okay with that, because his work should be seen out there, and it's going to reach audiences in a new way without demeaning or devaluing his work that is already out there. It's just going to reach new audiences more broadly.
So is this another, component of the class that eventually will be taught because you don't get it in school?
I mean, if somebody wants me to provide that opportunity, I feel like I do it in little bits and pieces in my life and the things that I do, even with, shout out to Lumber Room for bringing me in to do a preparator training for all BIPOC folks and helping them learn how to install shows and be preparators at galleries and museums. So, I mean, I try in little bits and pieces, but yeah. And I offer and they don't, anyway, we'll see. I'm offering, whoever's seeing this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't have this question fully formulated, but in parts, I think about what you're saying and leveling up and growing with my own growth in my pricing for my artwork. And I also really heavily consider who it's for, my Black people, and I want to be sure that it's accessible. And then also I look at other artists who are quite amazingly successful, and I went to, I think it was Russell Gallery, Street Gallery, I can't remember the name of it, but there was a piece like $50,000 or something like that, and I'm just thinking there are times for that, and then are there times where you can go back to what is accessible to the general audience, and is that okay to, I mean, I feel like it is. Like, what do you think about that?
I would say don't go back in your pricing. I would say make a variety of work that would allow for a range of prices. So you could have a large, amazing painting that's, say, $50,000, but then you could have a smaller work that's, say, $5,000. And then you could have an even smaller piece that's maybe $300. And then you could have a reproduction. So you have the full range. So the art community, the arcology, the galleries, the museums, they're going to be the ones that are drawn to the larger work. They're also going to recognize and see those prices and to be honest, value you based on the value that you are putting yourself out there with your work. So if you do a big painting and you put $300 on it, they're going to be like, well, that's a $300 artist. So you have to value yourself both in the idea of valuing yourself, but also in that monetary one has to match that. So there's a way to like have that full price range through the different levels of your work. That's what I would recommend, because it is a real thing to make work accessible. And some of the work in my art collection, because I do collect work, I love the really tiny pieces, like really like this big. I have a couple of paintings this big, and they sit on little tiny easels. And I bought them not because they're the most amazing, magical paintings ever. I bought them because I wanted to support that artist, and that was what I could afford to buy from that person. But they intentionally, like I said, knew that somebody might want to buy my work, but maybe they can't afford a big piece, so I'm going to make this little piece so that they can support me, and they did, and I did. So, yeah. Anything else? Okay, are we done for real this time?
Yeah.
Okay.